Hi, and welcome back to Skyline Scholars. Today we're going to be talking about holding patterns. The questions we want to ask are, what are holding patterns? How do holding patterns function? And how do we enter holding patterns? So first, let's just get a couple basic facts about holding patterns. Let's answer the question first, what are holding patterns? Holding patterns are basically a pattern in the sky, typically called a racetrack pattern, right? As you see here, for pilots to maintain when there's some kind of delay or ATC needs them to hold until they are ready to land at a certain airport. So with the holding pattern comes certain instructions and certain criteria, and we're going to cover those all right now. So a couple facts about holding patterns. So the first one is they're right-hand turns, so not like a standard traffic pattern procedure where you're going to go left-hand turns. They're standard right-hand turns. They last for 4 minutes. So the idea with the holding pattern is we have this oval, like the racetrack pattern, but we basically want to divide it into 4 different sections. So we have our inbound leg, our outbound leg, and our turns, right? So there's 2 turns, 1 inbound and 1 outbound leg, okay? So each one of those is going to be 1 minute, ideally. Speed limit, that's number 3. So I have the speeds here. So there's a speed limit for your holding patterns. The reason for that is because if you're going too fast, then your radius is going to increase because if you're going a fast distance, it's going to take longer. You're going to cover more distance when you turn. So your holding pattern is going to become too large. So there's a speed requirement. So the speed requirement is as follows. So we have under 6,000 feet, 6,000 feet or under, which is basically what our VFR pilots or general aviation pilots, even if you're IFR, a lot of times you're going to be flying 6,000 or less. You might go higher, but there's a speed limit for that as well. So we're talking about that. So 6,000 or less is 200 knots. 6,000 to 14,000 is 230 knots, and 14,000 to or greater is 265 knots. Okay. VORs or GPS or waypoint. Okay, number 4. So your holding pattern is going to take place at a VOR fix, a GPS fix, or waypoint. Okay. You're going to be doing your inbound leg for 1 minute. That's your goal. Okay. This is your inbound leg. Inbound. The reason why that's inbound is because it's going inbound to the station, right? To the station. This is going to be a north hold, so we're wanting to hold north of it. So we want to come this side. That would be considered holding north of it. This is our north, right? So this direction. They're timed or DME. Okay, so we're going to do timed hold and DME holds. Timed hold is what I'm talking about here. A DME hold is the same thing, just a little bit simpler. You're going to judge by the distance you are, the DME you are from the VOR. So let's say you're supposed to be 10 DME away from it, and that's how you calculate it. You can time your DME holds, it's just not necessary because they're DME holds. You're using your frame of reference as distance, not time. Okay, now how do we fly and make our 1 minute leg, our outbound minute 1 minute, our outbound leg 1 minute? How do we do that? We adjust our outbound. Okay, so this is our outbound. And I'm going to put adjust there. So the reason why we adjust our outbound leg is because say you have a headwind on your inbound, a 6-knot headwind, that's going to slow your time down. So let's say it takes you 1 minute and 20 seconds to make this leg. So in order to, next time you go around, you do your 180, which again, this is all done at a standard rate, instrument flying, all done at a standard rate. So 180 takes 1 minute because a 360 takes 2 minutes, right? So a 180 takes 1 minute. Once you do your outbound leg for hopefully 1 minute, then you go back and do your 180-degree turn for 1 minute. Let's say you come back here and you got a headwind now of 6 knots, and it's slowing you down basically. So it's taking you over 1 minute. Let's say it's taking you 1 minute and 20 seconds. Well, what you have to do is now come back around and adjust your outbound leg and subtract 20 seconds. So instead of 60 seconds, we're going to do 40-second outbound leg and then turn and then do our inbound leg, and hopefully that'll be 1 minute. And if that holds, then we're actually going to keep that cycle. We'll keep that cycle and see how that works. until it doesn't work anymore. Because what that's telling you is maybe you have this headwind, and remember, because you're turning 180 degrees, your headwind that you had on this side now becomes a tailwind on your outbound leg, so it's pushing you faster. That's why you subtract the time, okay? So, but you would keep that as standard now. So instead of trying to make 1 minute legs, you would really try to make 1 minute legs irrespective of your outbound leg. Your outbound leg, you want to do 40 seconds until you see it's not working anymore, which would mean that the wind is shifted again and you have to readjust for that, okay? The next thing we want to talk about with holding patterns is how do we enter a holding pattern? Now, first off, what I want to make you aware of right from the get-go is that ATC doesn't care about how you enter a holding pattern. It's just a part of our pilotage. The reason why we have holding pattern procedures, entry procedures, is because we want to get into the hold in the most efficient way, which would mean the way that incorporates the least amount of turning. So there's already pre-described ways of doing this to enter the hold. Okay, there's 3 different ways we can do this. Now, the best way to figure this out is when you have it drawn down like this, and I would encourage anybody who's learning this or needs a refresher about this to just write it down and get your lines on the paper. So the kind of rule of thumb here is that if you use 70 degrees for your first line, so about 70% of it, 70 degrees of it is going to be through this line here. And then we're going to, let's say, do another line about right here. Okay, now we're going to ask the question, what do we do? What do we do if we're over here? Anywhere in this region. How do we enter if we're anywhere on this side? Let's say even on this side, I know I got my compass rose there. But let's say, irrespective of that compass rose, let's say I'm entering from this side or here. So I'm entering from north, northeast, even northwest. What could I do? How do I enter this? This would be called a direct entry. Okay, I'm going to put a D for direct. This is going to be our direct entry. That means that, as you can see, if we're already on a north heading, northeast or northwest heading, we can kind of just come in here and swoop in to our radial, and we can kind of just swoop in into our radial. Because what's going to happen here is ATC is going to give you a certain radial it's down. It's going to ask you, they're going to tell you on what station to hold at. They're going to say on what side to hold at and on what radial to hold at, and they'll give you an altitude also. So here is a kind of a rendition of what they might say. They're going to say hold north, the VOR, whatever the name of it. Let's say it's the Ocala VOR. Hold north of the Ocala VOR on the 360 radial. Okay, so this will be the 360 radial on north, and let's say you're on a north heading already. So you're north going south. So that would mean you're holding north of it, right? You're holding north of it because you're coming this way, or you're on this side of it, and you would make your right-hand turns like that. If they don't mention anything about turns, then you would assume that it's a standard right-hand turn. Okay, they might say hold north VOR, hold north of the Ocala VOR, 360 radial, and with left-hand patterns or left-hand, left turns, Otherwise, you're going to think of it as standard. So, again, if we're anywhere north of the VOR, northeast, northwest, then we're just going to come in direct. Pretty simple. Now let's ask the question, what if we're here? Okay. What if we're anywhere in this region? What do we do? If we're anywhere in that region, which is opposite the VOR, what you can think about this is if you're opposite your radial, if you're opposite the direction that you're supposed to hold from, what you would do is you can come in and actually follow the inbound leg. We call this paralleling the inbound leg, and then coming in and turning and re-intercepting the inbound leg. Okay? So this is going to be called a parallel entry. Okay? That's going to be called a parallel entry. Now, again, the reason for this is because we're going to parallel the outbound leg or the inbound leg just in the opposite direction, and then make a 180 turn and intercept the radial. Again, I think you can see why this would make sense, because again, you're coming from the other side, and the easiest way to come in would be just to fly over it, intercept the radial, and come back around. Now, what if we were on this side? Anywhere over here. And again, this isn't perfect to scale. This could kind of, my 70-degree line could come down some, and but it would still be the same thing. There's some areas sometimes where you can make, it's kind of iffy. You could kind of do either or, but this just gives you a general idea of how you would choose, okay? So over here, we'd be coming through this segment over here, and how would we do that? We're coming, let's say we're coming and we're just about to pass over it, okay? We're going to do something like this. We're going to pass over the VOR and come back in and join our radial, and that makes what we call a teardrop, okay? That makes a teardrop entry. So those are our 3 entries. Again, it all depends on where you're at in relation to the station. So if you're on the side that you're supposed to hold on, and you're on that heading, then you could go and just do direct. If you're opposite, I think the easy way to figure this out is if you're on the same side, you can just go direct. If you're on the opposite side, you likely need to go parallel. Now, if you're to the east of it, if you're a little bit further off, then you might need to go and do a teardrop, okay? And that is holding patterns, and that's how you figure out your entries.